The spaceship Morning Star moved quietly through the darkness of space. It was the biggest and most beautiful ship in the Korean Space Federation's fleet. The ship looked like a giant silver arrow, with bright blue lights running along its sides. Inside, the halls were clean and white, with soft lights that made everyone feel calm and safe. Lieutenant Do-hyun walked through these halls, checking everything was okay. He was 30 years old, with short black hair and strong shoulders from years of military training. His black and silver uniform showed he was part of the ship's security team. But Do-hyun was more than just a guard. He was also very good at fixing things. He knew how spaceships worked better than most people on board. Today was special because the Morning Star was carrying Princess Hae-yeon. She was the daughter of Admiral Park, the most important person in the Korean Space Federation. The princess was traveling from Earth to the space colony near Alpha Centauri, where she would meet with other important people. Do-hyun remembered the first time he saw the princess, 3 days ago when the journey began. She wasn't what he expected. Instead of fancy dresses, she wore simple clothes. Her long black hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and she carried a computer tablet everywhere she went. She asked lots of questions about the ship, which surprised many people. Lieutenant Do-hyun, a soft voice called from behind him. He turned around and saw Princess Hae-yeon walking toward him. She was wearing a simple blue jumpsuit with the Korean Space Federation symbol on the shoulder. "Your Highness," Do-hyun said, bowing slightly. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything is fine," she said with a smile. "I was hoping you could explain more about the quantum drive to me. The way it pushes the ship through space is very interesting." Do-hyun smiled back. Most royal people didn't care about how things worked, but Princess Hae-yeon was different. She really wanted to learn. "Of course, Your Highness. Would you like to see the engineering room? We can look at the drive systems from there." The princess's eyes lit up. "Yes, please. And please, call me Hae-yeon when we're not in formal meetings. All this Your Highness stuff gets tiring." They walked together to the engineering room, which was 3 floors down. The room was big, with many screens showing different parts of the ship's engines. Blue and green lights blinked everywhere, and there was a quiet humming sound from the machines. "See this screen?" Do-hyun pointed to a large display. "It shows how the quantum drive works. Think of it like a very special engine. Instead of burning fuel like old rockets, it uses quantum energy to push the ship through space." Hae-yeon moved closer to look at the screen. "And these numbers here, they show how much energy we're using." "That's right," Do-hyun said. He was happy she understood so quickly. The drive needs to be very careful with the energy. Too much or too little could cause problems. As they talked, Do-hyun noticed something strange. The numbers on one screen were changing faster than normal. He moved closer to look. The quantum fuel pressure was going up and down in a way it shouldn't. "Is something wrong?" Hae-yeon asked, seeing his worried face. "I'm not sure," Do-hyun said slowly. He pressed some buttons on the screen, trying to get more information. "The fuel system is acting strange. It's probably nothing, but..." Suddenly, a loud alarm started ringing through the ship. Red lights flashed in the hallways. The ship's computer spoke in a calm voice. "Warning. Anomaly detected in quantum drive fuel system. All personnel report to emergency stations." Do-hyun's training kicked in immediately. "Princess, we need to get you to a safe place. The emergency shelter is 2 floors up." But before they could move, the ship shook hard. It felt like someone had hit it with a giant hammer. Hae-yeon almost fell, but Do-hyun caught her arm and helped her stay standing. "What was that?" she asked, her voice steady even though she must have been scared. Do-hyun looked at the main screen. What he saw made his heart beat faster. There was a crack in one of the fuel tanks. It was very small right now, but if it got bigger, it would be very dangerous. "The quantum fuel container is damaged," he explained. "We need to tell the captain right away." He pressed a button on his uniform to call the bridge. "Captain Jedwon, This is Lieutenant Du-hyun in engineering. We have a serious problem. Captain Ji-won's voice came back quickly. Report, Lieutenant. There's a crack in the main quantum fuel tank. It's small now, but the pressure readings suggest it's growing. Princess Hae-yeon is with me in engineering. The ship shook again, harder this time. More alarms started ringing. Get the princess to safety immediately, Captain Ji-won ordered. All other crew members prepare for emergency procedures. Do-hyun turned to Hae-yeon. We need to go now, Your High. Hae-yeon. But Hae-yeon was looking at another screen. Look at these numbers, she said. The crack is getting bigger very fast. If it keeps growing like this. She didn't finish her sentence, but she didn't need to. Do-hyun knew what would happen. If the crack got too big, the quantum fuel would leak out. That would be very, very bad. They hurried out of the engineering room and into the hallway. More people were there now, running to their emergency stations. The ship's computer kept giving warnings. All passengers, please move to emergency shelters. This is not a drill. As they walked quickly through the halls, Do-hyun thought about the crack in the fuel tank. He had a special tool with him, a nanoblade. It was a new kind of technology that could fix things at a very small level. Maybe it could fix the crack. But using it would be very dangerous. Hae-yeon must have been thinking too. Lieutenant, she said as they walked, I saw the damage reports. A crack like that, it could destroy the whole ship, couldn't it? Do-hyun didn't want to scare her, but he also didn't want to lie. Yes, it could. But the ship has many safety systems. The captain and crew know what to do. They reached a big door that led to the emergency stairs. But when Do-hyun tried to open it, it wouldn't move. The door's safety system is locked, he said, looking at the small screen next to it. The quantum radiation from the fuel leak must be affecting the controls. Hae-yeon looked around. What about that way? She pointed to another hallway. That's a longer route, but yes, it should work. Do-hyun started walking that way, making sure Hae-yeon was close behind him. As they walked, the ship's shaking got worse. The lights flickered, and some of them went out completely. Emergency lights came on, making everything look red. They passed a window, and Hae-yeon stopped to look out. The stars looked normal, but there was a strange purple glow coming from the back of the ship, where the quantum drive was. That's quantum radiation, Do-hyun explained. It means the leak is getting worse. Just then, Captain Ji-won's voice came through the ship's speakers. Attention all crew and passengers. The quantum fuel leak is becoming critical. All persons must evacuate to emergency pods immediately. This is a mandatory evacuation order. Do-hyun knew this was very serious. The captain would only order an evacuation if there was no other choice. They started moving faster, almost running now. But then something happened that made them both stop. There was a loud cracking sound, like ice breaking, and the whole ship seemed to jump sideways. Do-hyun grabbed a handrail on the wall to stay standing. Hae-yeon held onto his arm. When they looked back the way they came, they saw something that made them both very worried. The hallway behind them was filled with a beautiful but dangerous purple light. The quantum fuel was leaking into that part of the ship. Nobody could go through there now. The radiation would kill them. We're cut off, Hae-yeon said quietly. Do-hyun checked his computer tablet quickly. The way ahead of them led to the auxiliary engineering bay. It would be safe there for a little while. But they couldn't stay forever. The fuel leak was getting worse, and soon it would reach them. This way, he said, pointing forward. We can take shelter in the auxiliary bay while I think of a plan. As they ran toward the bay, Do-hyun felt the weight of his nanoblade in his pocket. He had an idea about how to fix the leak, but it would be very dangerous. He would have to get very close to the crack in the fuel tank, close enough that the radiation might kill him. But when he looked at Hae-yeon, running beside him with her face determined and brave, he knew what he had to do. He was responsible for keeping her safe, and he would do whatever it took to complete that mission. They reached the auxiliary engineering bay and closed the heavy doors behind them. The room was full of backup systems and emergency equipment. Hei-yun went straight to one of the computer screens and started looking at the ship's status. "The crack is now 2 meters long," she said, her voice serious. "The main fuel tank will fail completely in less than 30 minutes. Do-hyun nodded. He took out his nano blade and looked at it. The blade was special. It could change its shape and properties to fix different kinds of damage. It might be able to seal the crack in the fuel tank. "Hei-yun," he said, not using her title now because there wasn't time for formality. "I think I know how to fix this. But it's going to be very dangerous." She looked at him, then at the nano blade in his hand. She was smart. She understood right away what he was thinking. "You want to use that to seal a crack," she said. It wasn't a question. "But the radiation levels near the breach, they're too high. No one could survive that." "Someone has to try," Do-hyun said simply. "If we don't fix it, everyone on this ship will die when the fuel tank explodes, including you." Hei-yun was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened her shoulders and looked him in the eye. "Then we'll do it together. I can operate the emergency containment fields from here. It might give you a few extra seconds." Do-hyun started to protest, but she held up her hand to stop him. "I am still your princess, Lieutenant, and I am ordering you to let me help." Despite the danger they were in, Do-hyun smiled. She really was unlike any princess he had ever met. The ship shook again, and more alarms started ringing. Time was running out. They needed to act soon, or it would be too late. Do-hyun looked at his nano blade one more time, then at the brave princess who was ready to risk her life to help him save the ship. He took a deep breath and began preparing for what might be the most dangerous mission of his life. The emergency lights continued to flash red, and somewhere in the ship, more metal cracked as the quantum fuel leak grew worse. But in the auxiliary engineering bay, a soldier and a princess prepared to do something that would become a legend in the Korean Space Federation, if they survived to tell about it. On the bridge of the Morning Star, Captain Ji-won stood looking at the main screen. Her face was serious as she watched the purple dots that showed where the quantum fuel was leaking. More and more dots appeared every minute. The captain knew she had to make a decision soon, but none of her choices were good. "Report," she said to her crew. Her voice was calm, even though she felt worried inside. The ship's chief engineer, Senior Officer Tae-young, spoke first. "The crack is growing faster than we thought it would. The quantum fuel is leaking into decks 3 through 5. We've lost contact with parts of the ship because of the radiation." "How many people are still on board?" Captain Ji-won asked. "Most of the passengers and crew have reached the escape pods," said Officer Yuna from her station. "But we still can't contact Lieutenant Do-hyun or Princess Hei-yun. They're trapped in the auxiliary engineering bay." Captain Ji-won walked closer to the screen. The purple dots were spreading like spilled water. Soon, they would reach the auxiliary bay where the princess and the lieutenant were hiding. But if the captain waited too long to start the emergency plan, everyone on the ship would die. "Your orders, Captain?" Tae-young asked quietly. Before she could answer, a new voice came through the ship's communication system. It was Do-hyun. "Bridge, this is Lieutenant Do-hyun. Can you hear me?" "We hear you, Lieutenant," Captain Ji-won said quickly. "What's your status?" "Princess Hei-yun is safe with me," Do-hyun reported. "We're in the auxiliary engineering bay. But Captain, I think I know how to fix this." Everyone on the bridge looked at each other. "Fix it? How could anyone fix a quantum fuel leak this big?" "Explain," the captain ordered. "I have my experimental nano blade with me," Do-hyun said. "It's designed to work with quantum particles. If I can get close enough to the crack, I might be able to seal it." The bridge was quiet. Everyone knew what Do-hyun wasn't saying. To get close enough to the crack, he would have to walk through deadly radiation. Then another voice joined the conversation. "Captain, this is Princess Hei-yun. Lieutenant Do-hyun's plan could work. I've looked at the ship's systems from here. I can help by controlling the emergency containment fields. Captain Ji-won closed her eyes for a moment. She was responsible for everyone on the ship. The safe choice would be to order Do-hyun and Hye-yeon to find another way out. But if they didn't try to fix the leak, the whole ship would explode when the quantum fuel tank failed. The explosion would be so big it might damage or destroy the escape pods too. "Lieutenant," she said finally, "what are your chances of success?" "If the princess helps with the containment fields, maybe 50%, Do-hyun answered honestly. "But Captain, we have to try. The fuel leak is getting worse. Soon it will be too late." The captain looked at her chief engineer. Tae-young nodded slowly. "He's right," the engineer said. "We don't have much time left." "Very well," Captain Ji-won said. "Lieutenant Do-hyun, I am giving you permission to attempt to seal the breach. But you must promise me one thing." "Yes, Captain. If it becomes too dangerous, you will retreat immediately." "That's an order. We can't lose both you and the princess." "Understood, Captain," Do-hyun said. In the auxiliary engineering bay, Do-hyun put down the communication device and turned to Hye-yeon. She was already working at the control panel, studying the ship's systems. "Are you sure about this?" he asked her. "It's going to be very dangerous, even with the containment fields." Hye-yeon looked up from the panel. "My father always taught me that a leader must be willing to take the same risks as those who serve them. I won't let you do this alone." Do-hyun nodded. He started checking his equipment. He put on the best radiation suit they had found in the emergency lockers, but he knew it wouldn't protect him completely. The quantum radiation was too strong. "The crack is here," Hye-yeon said, pointing to a diagram on her screen. "It's grown to almost 3 meters now. But there's a maintenance tunnel that leads right to it. If you follow that tunnel, you can reach the breach point." Do-hyun looked at the diagram. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and dark, but it was their best chance. He took out his nano blade and checked it one more time. The blade looked simple, just a handle and a short silver blade. But inside it was very complex technology that could change the blade's properties to match different materials. "The blade will need to match the quantum frequency of the fuel," he explained to Hye-yeon. "When it does, it should be able to seal the crack. But I'll only have one chance. If I get it wrong." He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen if he failed. Hye-yeon touched his arm. "Then don't get it wrong," she said simply. Do-hyun smiled. He was about to say something else when the ship shook hard again. This time, the lights went out completely for a few seconds before the emergency power came back on. That was the secondary power core failing. Hye-yeon said, looking at her screens. "We're running on emergency power now. We have to hurry." Do-hyun put on his helmet and sealed it. The radiation suit felt heavy and stiff, but he would need every bit of protection it could give him. He checked the oxygen meter. He had 30 minutes of air. It should be enough time. "Remember," Hye-yeon said as she helped him check the suit, "I'll control the containment fields from here. They'll give you some protection from the radiation, but they won't last long. The emergency power isn't strong enough to keep them running for more than a few minutes." "A few minutes is all I need," Do-hyun said, trying to sound confident. Hye-yeon touched the control panel, and a door opened in the wall. Behind it was the entrance to the maintenance tunnel. Purple light flickered in the distance, showing where the quantum fuel was leaking. "The ship's computer will guide you to the breach," Hye-yeon said. "I've programmed it to show you the safest path. But Do-hyun," she paused, then continued, "please be careful." Do-hyun looked at her. Even in this dangerous situation, she was calm and brave. He saluted her formally. "I'll come back, Your Highness. I promise." Then he turned and entered the maintenance tunnel. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss. The tunnel was narrow, just wide enough for one person to crawl through. Small lights on the floor showed him where to go. Do-hyun started moving forward, trying to be quick but careful. "I'm tracking you on the sensors," Hyun's voice came through his helmet radio. The radiation levels are rising. You'll start feeling it soon. Do-hyun already could feel something. The air in the tunnel seemed to shimmer, like the air above hot pavement on a summer day. His radiation meter was beeping steadily now, warning him of the danger. He kept crawling forward. The tunnel turned left, then right. The purple glow was getting stronger. His hands, even inside the thick gloves of the radiation suit, were starting to tingle. "You're getting close to the breach point," Hyun reported. "Another 20 meters. I'm activating the containment fields now." Blue energy fields appeared in the air around Do-hyun. They looked like thin sheets of light. They would help block some of the radiation, but not all of it. The radiation meter was beeping faster now. Warning messages flashed inside his helmet, telling him he was receiving dangerous levels of radiation. But he couldn't stop now. 10 meters, Hyun said. Her voice was steady, helping him stay focused. The crack should be right around the next turn. Do-hyun turned the corner and saw it. The crack in the fuel tank was like a jagged line of purple fire. Quantum fuel leaked out of it in waves, making strange patterns in the air. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. "I can see the breach," he reported, getting ready to use the nano-blade. He pulled out the blade and pressed a button on the handle. The blade started to glow softly, responding to the quantum energy around it. Now came the hard part. "The blade needs to match the exact frequency of the quantum fuel," he said, more to himself than to Hyun. "Too high or too low, and it won't work." He held the blade closer to the crack, watching how it reacted to the leaking fuel. The blade's color started to change, trying to match the purple energy waves. Suddenly, warning alarms started blaring through his helmet radio. "The emergency power is failing." Hyun's voice was urgent now. "The containment fields are collapsing. Do-hyun, you have less than a minute." Do-hyun could see the blue energy fields flickering around him. Without them, the radiation would kill him quickly. But he couldn't rush this. The frequency had to be perfect. The blade's color shifted again, getting closer to the right shade of purple. Do-hyun's hands were shaking now, partly from radiation exposure and partly from the effort of holding the blade steady. 30 seconds, Hyun called. The radiation meter was screaming warnings now. Do-hyun could feel heat all through his body. His vision was starting to blur at the edges. But then he saw it. The blade's color matched the quantum fuel exactly. This was his chance. "Now," he shouted and thrust the blade toward the crack. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. The blade touched the crack and seemed to stop, like it was hitting a wall. Do-hyun pushed harder, using all his strength. Then, with a sound like singing crystal, the blade broke through. Its edge touched the quantum fuel and started to spread, like water soaking into paper. The blade's special material was doing its job, filling the crack and sealing it. "It's working," Hyun exclaimed. "The fuel pressure is dropping. The leak is stopping." Do-hyun watched as the blade continued to spread along the crack. The purple glow of leaking fuel grew dimmer and dimmer, but his vision was getting darker too. The radiation exposure had been too much. "Do-hyun." Hyun's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Do-hyun, answer me." He tried to speak, but no words came out. The last thing he saw was the crack sealing completely, the purple light fading away to nothing. Then everything went black. In the auxiliary engineering bay, Hyun watched in horror as Do-hyun's life signs began to fade on her monitor. The brave lieutenant had sealed the breach and saved the ship, but the cost might have been too high. She grabbed the emergency communicator. "Captain, the breach is sealed, but Lieutenant Do-hyun is down. We need a medical team immediately." As rescue teams raced to save the unconscious hero, the Morning Star's quantum drive stabilized for the first time in hours. The immediate danger was over, thanks to one man's courage and one princess's determination to help him succeed. But the story wasn't over yet. Now they had to save the man who had saved them all. The rescue team moved quickly through the maintenance tunnel. They wore thick radiation suits and carried medical equipment. Chief Medical Officer Sun Mei led the team. Following the tracking signal from Du Hyun's suit, the tunnel was dark now, with only their flashlights showing the way. In the auxiliary engineering bay, Princess Hye-yeon watched their progress on the screen. Her hands gripped the edge of the control panel tightly. The medical team's helmet cameras showed what they were seeing. Du Hyun lay very still near the sealed crack in the fuel tank. His radiation suit was damaged in several places from the intense quantum energy. How much further? Captain Jae-won asked through the communication system. She was watching from the bridge, coordinating the rescue effort. We're almost there, Sun Mai reported. 10 more meters. The radiation levels are still high, but the containment suits are holding. Hye-yeon looked at another screen that showed Du Hyun's vital signs. His heart was beating, but very slowly. The radiation exposure had been severe. They needed to get him to the medical bay quickly. The rescue team finally reached Du Hyun. Sun Mai immediately started checking his condition, while the others prepared the special stretcher they had brought. The stretcher had its own radiation shield to protect patients during transport. Patient is unconscious but stable, Sun Mai reported. Radiation exposure is at critical levels. We need to move him now. Very carefully, the team lifted Do Hyun onto the stretcher. His nano blade was still stuck in the crack where it had sealed the fuel leak. They had to leave it there. Removing it might start the leak again. Beginning transport, Sun Mai said. Princess, we'll need the fastest route to medical bay. Hye-yeon was already working on it. Take the service elevator on level 4, she said. I've overridden the safety locks. It will take you straight to medical. The team started moving, carrying Do Hyun's stretcher carefully through the narrow tunnel. Hye-yeon watched their progress, guiding them around areas where radiation levels were still dangerous. Her royal training had taught her to stay calm in emergencies, but she found herself holding her breath every time the medical monitors beeped. How bad is it? She asked Sun Mai quietly. The doctor took a moment before answering. The radiation exposure was very high, she said honestly. But the lieutenant is strong, and he got help quickly. Those are both good things. They reached the service elevator. As soon as they were inside, Hye-yeon made it move faster than normal. The elevator shot upward through the ship, rushing toward the medical bay. While they moved, Sun Mai and her team worked on Do Hyun. They gave him medicines to help with radiation sickness and put an oxygen mask over his face. The medical monitors showed his heart rate getting a little stronger. The elevator will stop in 30 seconds, Hye-yeon told them. I've cleared all the halls between there and medical bay. No one will be in your way. When the elevator doors opened, the team rushed out. They moved quickly down the empty hallways, their footsteps echoing in the quiet ship. Most of the crew and passengers were still in the escape pods, waiting to hear if it was safe to return. They reached the medical bay, and Sun Mi's team immediately went to work. They moved Do Hyun from the stretcher to a special medical bed. The bed had machines all around it that could help treat radiation exposure. Princess, Sun Mai said gently, you should wait outside now. We need to start the treatment right away. But Hye-yeon shook her head. I'm staying, she said firmly. He risked his life to save this ship, to save me. I won't leave him alone now. Sun Li looked like she wanted to argue, but there was no time. She turned back to her patient and started the treatment process. First, they carefully removed Do Hyun's damaged radiation suit. Under it, his skin was red and burned in places where radiation had leaked through. The medical team worked quickly. They covered the burns with special healing patches and started giving him more medicines through an IV line. The machines around the bed hummed as they worked to help his body recover from the radiation. His cells show heavy radiation damage, one of the doctors reported, looking at a screen. We'll need to start the nano treatment right away. Sun Li nodded and took out a small silver case. Inside were tiny machines, smaller than a human could see. These nanomachines were designed to repair damage from radiation exposure. They were very expensive and rare, usually reserved for the most important people. Use as many as he needs, He-Yun said, seeing Sun Mai hesitate. I'll take full responsibility. The doctor nodded and began preparing the treatment. She put the nanomachines into Do-Hyun's IV line, and they started flowing into his blood. On the medical screens, they could see the tiny machines beginning their work, fixing damaged cells one by one. Hours passed slowly. He-Yun stayed in the medical bay, watching Do-Hyun's vital signs on the monitors. Sometimes they would get weaker, and the medical team would rush to help him. Other times, they would get stronger, giving everyone hope. Captain Jae-won came to check on them several times. She had good news. The ship was safe now. The quantum fuel leak was completely stopped, thanks to Do-Hyun's nanoblade. Engineers were already working on permanent repairs. The escape pods are starting to return, the captain told He-Yun during one visit. Everyone wants to know about the hero who saved the ship. He-Yun looked at Do-Hyun's pale face. He never wanted to be a hero, she said softly. He just wanted to help people. The captain put a hand on He-Yun's shoulder. That's what makes him a real hero, she said. And thanks to you helping him, he succeeded. You showed great courage too, princess. He-Yun shook her head. I just did what needed to be done. Do-Hyun did the hard part. As if he heard them talking about him, Do-Hyun's fingers moved slightly. The medical monitors showed his brain activity increasing. Doctor, He-Yun called. I think he's waking up. Sun Li hurried over and checked the monitors. Yes, he's coming out of it. This is a good sign. Princess, talk to him. Familiar voices can help. He-Yun moved closer to the bed. Lieutenant Do-Hyun, can you hear me? You did it. You saved the ship. Everyone is safe now. Do-Hyun's eyes flickered open slowly. He looked confused for a moment, then seemed to remember where he was. He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Sun Mai quickly gave him some water through a straw. After drinking a little, Do-Hyun tried again. The crack? He asked, his voice very weak. Completely sealed, He-Yun told him. Your nanoblade worked perfectly. The engineers say they've never seen anything like it. Do-Hyun managed a small smile. Good, he whispered. Didn't want to disappoint my princess. He-Yun felt tears in her eyes, but she smiled back at him. You could never disappoint me, Lieutenant. You're the bravest person I've ever met. How bad? Do-Hyun asked, looking at Sun Mai. The doctor checked his latest test results. The radiation exposure was severe, she said honestly, but the nano treatment is working better than we hoped. Your cells are healing. With rest and more treatment, you should recover fully. Do-Hyun nodded slightly, then looked worried. The other crew members, the passengers. Everyone is safe, Captain Jae-won said, stepping forward. The escape pods are returning now. You'll probably get a lot of visitors once you're stronger. The whole ship wants to thank you. Do-Hyun's eyes were getting heavy again. The medicines were making him sleepy. Just did my duty, he mumbled. Rest now, He-Yun said softly. You've earned it. As Do-Hyun drifted back to sleep, his vital signs stayed strong and steady. The worst was over. The nanomachines would continue their work, healing his body cell by cell. It would take time, but he would recover. He-Yun finally let herself relax a little. She had been so scared when Do-Hyun collapsed in the maintenance tunnel, but he was going to be okay. He had risked everything to save the ship, and he had survived. Captain Jae-won touched her arm gently. Princess, you should rest too. You've been here for hours. But He-Yun shook her head. I'm staying, she said simply. He didn't leave me when things were dangerous. I won't leave him now. The captain smiled understanding. She had seen how He-Yun and Do-Hyun worked together during the crisis. They had formed a special bond, the kind that only comes from facing danger together. Very well, Jai once said. I'll have someone bring you something to eat and drink. And Princess, your father would be proud of how you handled yourself today. Hei-yun thanked her, then turned back to watch over Do-hyun. The medical bay was quiet now, except for the soft beeping of monitors and the quiet hum of healing machines. Outside, the ship was slowly returning to normal. Passengers were coming back from the escape pods, crew members were checking systems and making repairs. But here in the medical bay, a princess watched over her brave lieutenant, waiting for him to wake up again. She had many things she wanted to tell him, about courage and duty and friendship, but those things could wait. For now, she was just glad he was alive. The story of how Lieutenant Do-hyun sealed the breach with his blade would be told many times in the days and years to come. But few would know about these quiet hours in the medical bay, where a princess showed that true nobility means staying by the side of those who risk everything to help others. 2 weeks had passed since the quantum fuel leak on the Morning Star. The ship was now safely docked at the Alpha Centauri space station. Engineers had finished fixing the fuel tank, making it stronger than before. Do-hyun's nanoblade was still part of the repair, sealed forever into the ship's hull like a badge of honor. In the medical bay of the space station, Do-hyun sat up in his bed, looking out at the stars through a large window. His skin had healed well thanks to the nano-treatment, though he still felt tired sometimes. Dr. Sunbai said this was normal and would get better with time. Princess Hei-yun visited him every day. She wasn't dressed in simple clothes anymore. Her father, Admiral Park, had arrived at the station yesterday. Now she had to wear formal royal clothes again. But she still talked to Do-hyun the same way, like a friend rather than a princess. The station engineers want to study your nanoblade design, she told him during one visit. They say they've never seen technology like it. How did you make it? Do-hyun smiled. He was getting stronger each day, and talking was much easier now. I worked on it during my free time, he explained. I thought it might be useful for emergency repairs. I never expected to test it quite like this. Hei-yun sat in the chair next to his bed. Father wants to give you a medal, she said. Actually, he wants to give you several medals. And a promotion. I don't need medals, Do-hyun said quietly. I was just doing my job. Saving an entire ship and everyone on it is a bit more than just doing your job, a deep voice said from the doorway. Do-hyun and Hei-yun looked up to see Admiral Park himself standing there. He was a tall man with gray hair and a serious face, but today he was smiling. Everyone in the room tried to stand up to show respect, but the Admiral waved them back down. Please, stay comfortable, he said. Especially you, Lieutenant Do-hyun. Or should I say Commander Do-hyun? Do-hyun looked surprised. Commander. The Admiral nodded. Yes, the promotion papers were signed this morning. And that's just the beginning. He walked into the room and sat down near Do-hyun's bed. The Korean Space Federation needs more officers like you, he continued. People who can think quickly and solve problems, even in dangerous situations. I want you to help create a new emergency response team. You'll train others to handle crisis situations like the one you faced. Do-hyun thought about this, teaching others what he knew, helping them learn to save lives. It was an important job. I would be honored, sir, he said. Good. The Admiral smiled again. And I hear you're also good at explaining technical things to people who want to learn. He looked at his daughter when he said this. Hei-yun blushed slightly. Father, Do-hyun was very helpful. I learned more about ship operations from him than from any of my royal tutors. Yes, I heard about that too. Admiral Park looked thoughtful. Which is why I have another offer for you, Commander. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the space station. The Korean Space Federation is growing. We're building new ships, exploring new star systems. But we need leaders who understand both the technical side of space travel and the human side. People who know how to make hard decisions and care about others. The Admiral turned back to face them. Commander Do-hyun, when you're fully recovered, I want you to be part of the leadership training program for new officers, and Hae-yun will be one of your first students. Both Do-hyun and Hae-yun looked surprised. The admiral continued, "My daughter has shown she has the courage and quick thinking needed for command, but she needs more technical training. Who better to teach her than the man who worked so well with her during a crisis?" Do-hyun looked at Hae-yun. She was trying not to smile too big, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "It would be my honor to help train the princess," he said formally. "Good. It's settled then." Admiral Park walked to the door, then stopped and turned around. "Oh, and Commander, the medal ceremony will be next week. I expect you to be there, even if you think you don't need medals. The people need heroes to look up to. You've earned that role, whether you wanted it or not." After the admiral left, Hae-yun turned to Do-hyun with a big smile. "Commander Do-hyun," she said, testing out his new title. "It sounds good. And now you'll have to keep teaching me about quantum drives and emergency procedures." "As long as we don't have to practice with real fuel leaks," Do-hyun said, smiling back. Over the next few days, more visitors came to see Do-hyun. Captain Jae-won brought him reports about how his nanoblade design was helping engineers make ships safer. Senior Officer Tae-young wanted to talk about including nanoblade training in engineering courses. Even the crew members from the escape pods came to thank him. Dr. Sun-mi kept checking his recovery progress. "The nano machines have finished repairing the radiation damage," she told him. "Your test results are all normal now. A few more days of rest, and you can leave the medical bay." Just in time for the medal ceremony, Hae-yun said. She had brought him a new uniform, specially made with commander's rank insignia on it. The ceremony was held in the space station's main hall. It was very fancy, with flags of the Korean Space Federation hanging on the walls. Many important people were there, including ship captains and space station commanders. Do-hyun stood straight in his new uniform as Admiral Park pinned medals on his chest. One was for bravery in saving the ship. Another was for creating the nanoblade technology that would help keep other ships safe. The last and highest medal was the Star of the Federation, given only to those who risked their lives to save others. "Commander Do-hyun represents the best of humanity," Admiral Park said in his speech. "He showed us that one person's courage and quick thinking can save hundreds of lives. His actions will be remembered as an example of true heroism." After the ceremony, there was a celebration. Do-hyun wasn't used to being the center of attention, but he tried to be polite to everyone who wanted to talk to him. Hae-yun stayed nearby, helping him when he got tired. Later, they found a quiet spot near a window where they could see the morning star docked at the station. The ship looked beautiful, its silver hull shining in the starlight. "How does it feel?" Hae-yun asked. "Being a hero?" Do-hyun thought for a moment. "Strange," he said honestly. "I don't feel different. I just did what needed to be done. You helped just as much as I did." "Maybe that's what makes a real hero," Hae-yun said. "Someone who doesn't try to be a hero, but just helps others because it's the right thing to do." They were quiet for a while, watching the stars. Then Hae-yun spoke again. "I start my command training next month," she said. "Will you be ready to teach by then?" "I'll be ready," Do-hyun promised. "But I hope you know, being your teacher doesn't mean I'll go easy on you. You'll have to learn everything about ship operations, emergency procedures, and quantum mechanics." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Hae-yun said with a smile. "After all, I might need to help seal a quantum fuel leak someday." "Let's hope not," Do-hyun said quickly, but he was smiling too. "Although if anyone could handle it, it would be you." The celebration continued around them, but they stayed by the window, talking about ships and stars and the future. They had both changed since that dangerous day on the Morning Star. Do-hyun was no longer just a security officer, and Hae-yun was no longer just a princess. They had faced death together and come out stronger. In the years that followed, Commander Do-hyun became known throughout the Korean Space Federation for training the best emergency response teams. His nanoblade technology was installed on all Federation ships, making space travel safer for everyone. Princess Heiyun finished her command training and became a ship captain herself. She was known for being both technically skilled and caring about her crew. Sometimes, when their duties allowed, she and Do-hyun would meet and talk about that day on the Morning Star, when a brave lieutenant and a curious princess worked together to save a ship. Their story was told to new space cadets as an example of what could be achieved with courage, quick thinking, and teamwork. But the part that meant the most to both of them wasn't the dramatic moment when the breach was sealed. It was the quiet hours afterward, when they learned that true strength comes not just from being brave, but from being there for each other. The Morning Star continued to fly between the stars, carrying the nanoblade sealed in its hull like a reminder. And somewhere in that vast space between worlds, other heroes waited for their chance to prove that humanity's greatest power isn't in our technology, but in our willingness to risk everything to help others.